Welcome back into the Cannes Film Festival 2023 Parallel Challenge here on Fantasy Film Ball. We are your hosts, Matt and Arnaud.
That means we are watching an equivalent film to all 21 competition titles at Cannes this year. So in this video, we are going to talk about Dead Souls and Youth by Wang Bing.
We are going to be talking about a behemoth of a film, Wang Bing's 2018 documentary magnum opus, Dead Souls. Before we get into that film, let's talk a little bit about Wang Bing and why he's in competition at Cannes this year. He is a Chinese documentary filmmaker, and he's often viewed as one of the most important filmmakers in the medium of documentary in the world right now. It's very rare that we see a documentary film in competition at Cannes. The last time that this happened, I believe, was in 2004. So it is very notable that someone who makes documentaries is being seen as worth this platform. So Wang Bing started his career off with a major bang with the film Tiji Ku, West of the Tracks, which is a 10.5-hour long documentary. It has a 4.4 out of 5 on LETTERBOXD, just to show you how unanimously loved this film is. Despite being 10.5 hours long, it's frequently ranked as one of the greatest documentary films of all time. Wang seems to be very fascinated by the topic of the subjugation of the Chinese working class and the people who have been forgotten by the government. He frequently walks the line of possibly making himself a political enemy to China, though I don't think he's ever fully crossed it, but it seems like he's always just walking that tightrope of potentially never being allowed back in his country again. Why we chose Dead Souls. This film is an 8-hour long documentary film, is often compared to Showa. This is a film that we're both very intrigued by. It premiered in Cannes in 2018, and unlike Tiji Ku, it is not part of the recognized canon, so we just took this opportunity to watch this film because we might not have gotten around to it otherwise.
Like you said, this is a long movie. This is not as long as Tiji Ku. It's 2 hours shorter, so a bit less demanding than that, slightly. It's essentially a collection of testimonies, so we go from one interview to the next, and these are all testimonies about the Gansu genocide that persecuted people that were deemed on the right in the late 50s, early 60s. Think Russian gulags, essentially, trying to put away political dissidents or people that were seen as political enemies to make examples out of. We occasionally intercut with footage of bones, remains of bodies in the desert, of mass graves. Very heavy stuff. But yeah, Matt, you mentioned Showa, which of course is a very direct comparison because it's an extremely long documentary about another genocide. Having not seen Showa, I'm curious, how are these two similar, if they are similar?
So I think Showa is one of the greatest films of all time. And I would agree with Roger Ebert, who said that Showa is, it doesn't deserve to be rated because it's beyond that. This is not a film, it's not a piece of cinema that we can rank alongside other films. It's something entirely different. Honestly, I think that every human tragedy should have a document like Showa. Show us the faces of the people who witnessed and suffered in these tragedies to memorialize those voices, those faces, those souls. The films are similar. The thing that I think is the same between both films is that they question why films and runtimes must remain kept in a little box. It instead takes the role of a nonfiction volume. It's asking why, if a book can be thousands and thousands of pages long, containing every single testimony, why is a film limited to a specific runtime? It says that every victim that is spoken to has a right to be heard. They have a right to tell their story and be given that time to speak. It is important to hear these voices, to see these faces, to confront this part of history, this genocide that happened, because these voices, these faces will not be around to tell this story for much longer.
This is the type of film that is kind of invites you to, put it down and come back to it later. It doesn't tell you have to pay attention to every word. You have to watch this all in one sitting without going to the bathroom. This isn't the same kind of cinematic experience, let's just say. What is really striking about this film to me is the simplicity of the form and just how de-aestheticized it is. This really has an amateurish quality to it. Wang Bing is not interested in having a huge production. He's interested in keeping things simple, in keeping things human. Film his subjects at a certain distance, occasionally medium close-ups, but mostly at a certain distance to get their surroundings. We get a sense of their soul, not just their voice. This isn't a podcast. We have to get a sense of who these people are. It's a really important document. A lot of these testimonies were filmed back in 2005 and 2006. The fact that he filmed so many people and that almost all of these people are now dead, the fact that we actually have their testimonies filmed, that is really impressive. To me, it's really a kind of academic document, and I don't mean that in the way people might interpret that as being, oh, it's boring, it's a really long academic paper or something like that. I mean that in the sense that Wang Bing is more interested in getting things right than he is in making something digestible. There's a saying that journalism is quick and dirty, while academic research is long and meticulous. This is an academic / historical document more than it is journalism put on film.
This is a film that Wang Bing is not intending to be seen as a film. It's not intended to be thrown on and saying, oh, I just learned something about this horrible thing that happened. It's almost as though this is compiled as a piece for people to research deeper into this in the future, because these voices, these souls, will disappear and be gone from this earth very soon. The CCP in China is not interested in preserving this history. They're not interested in talking about this thing that happened or reconciling with it. The bones are still out in the open in the desert. No one has come to cover them. They're not ashamed, but they're also not even acknowledging that this has happened. This event, this genocide, dies with the survivors, and that's what Wang Bing is tackling here. But this is also why this is so hard to evaluate as a film. It feels very unfair to hear these stories and judge whether they work cinematically, or to assess their worth based on the emotions that they evoked. It feels unfair and honestly kind of gross to say, oh, well, this film didn't make me cry, so, I don't know if it did what it should have done as a film about a genocide. That's unfair and honestly not how you should be evaluating a film like this. But it's very hard to look at this as a piece of cinema when it defies everything about cinema.
Seeing these interviews back to back to back to back, you really start to, delve into this topic much deeper than you would in a traditional 1 hour and 30-minute documentary. And you really start to see patterns. You yourself kind of have to do a lot of the work that would normally be done for you, where things would be intercut and kind of neatly spliced together for you to make links. You start to realize everybody's talking about fighting for gruel, being extremely hungry, and having their skin being bloated. You see patterns about people being arrested and called rightist for calling out behavior they thought was unacceptable for their beliefs of what communism should be, which is, one of the great ironies of totalitarianism. So you have a lot of these things where you really start to make links, and that's one of the more rewarding things about this film. It's a film that you should only kind of dive in and challenge yourself to watch if you are interested in this subject matter. Otherwise, there's really no point.
I'm really amazed above all else at Wang Bing's bravery in touching on a topic like this when the current political party in power is also the one who perpetrated this. It's fascinating to see him talk about this so openly. With that said, we should talk a little bit about Youth Spring, the film that Wang Bing is bringing to Cannes this year. What is this film about?
Well, Youth in parentheses Spring, I believe, is the first chapter in an intended trilogy or series of films. I heard it was trilogy, but I know there are 4 seasons, so I'm very confused. Maybe the second one is summer, fall, or something like that, and the last one is winter. I don't know. Either way, this is a very style film that follows Chinese youths as they go to, I believe, a textile factory or, a factory, and kind of work there over the whole year. And we just kind of follow their routine, their day-to-day lives. And I believe the intended effect is that by the time we get to the last film of the series, we kind of see them go back to their families for Chinese New Year, so that we go, full circle. The hoop dreams of Chinese textile workers, something like that. Even though it's gonna be like 4 times the length of Hoop Dreams, which is already 3 hours long. I have some doubts about Youth's potential at winning a prize at Cannes. First of all, because it is a long and slow documentary. We've seen some of the last long and slow films that have played the festival, like Pacifiction or Mektub, My Love Intermezzo.
I'm sure that's why it lost. I'm sure that's why Mektub.
Yeah.
did not get a prize at Cannes.
Well, you know, I'm looking at the runtime. The second point being that this is the first film of a series, and therefore it could feel incomplete. We've not seen it, so obviously we don't know if it feels incomplete by the end, but it might. Another thing that makes it a little bit hard for us to judge this film is that Dead Souls might not be the best comparison, in that Dead Souls is a collection of testimonies, whereas this apparently is more, you know, contemporary verite filmmaking, so it might be a little bit closer. One of his films like Till Madness Do Us Part, I think is the name, where he follows people in mental hospitals throughout a set period of time. So we might not have the best reference here.
That is true. We might really not know what Wang Bing is going to do after seeing this film. We haven't seen his other films. We don't know what his brand of verite looks like. But what we do know is that he is very bold and he is very unafraid to talk about conditions and to talk about people that often get shoved to the periphery, kind of exist on the fringes. I'm sure these films will be interesting, and apparently the plan is to play at all of the major festivals, and if it is a 4-film series, I would imagine that they would do spring at Cannes this year, summer at Venice, autumn at Berlin, and then finish off with winter at Cannes again next year. And if that's the case, and they do come back to Cannes next year with the finale of the series, it's possible that that could be a win contender, with the magnitude of this opus being clear at that point. Also, this is not an Oscar documentary contender. I'm going to say that in big capital letters. This is not an Oscar documentary contender. We're going to see it's a documentary playing in Cannes competition. People are going to say immediately, well, what if this is an Oscar movie? It's not.
Cannes has a very different image and relationship with documentary than the Oscars do. The Oscars'
Yes.
brand of documentaries, the ones they really tend to like, are the films that are much more easily digestible, you know, bite-sized, the ones that come out of Sundance, essentially. The one thing I would like also to mention is that I know that we just said that this film is probably not winning anything, but I do want to say that if this wins the Palme d'Or, this would be the 3rd documentary in a row to win at one of the major 3 European film festivals. The Laura Porches film, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, win the Golden Lion last year. On the Adamant win the Golden Bear this year at Berlin. And then if we have a documentary win this year, we're gonna be seeing a trend. Maybe documentaries are making a comeback.
The documentary renaissance right there. If we do see a documentary contender from Cannes, it's usually something that has played Sundance or South by Southwest, like For Sama or like All That Breathes. This, not a contender. Thank you so much for joining us for our Cannes Parallel Challenge today. Make sure you subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of the blitz of Cannes content that we are putting out right now. And make sure you stay tuned to figure out who is going to win our Palme d'Or this year. Thank you so much for watching.